the man, the myth, the meme.
How do you feel about this? Because I feel like Jeff Kaplan for you...
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Watchtime, as we've got a topic that is very near and dear to me this week that I'm very keen to go into, that I actually don't think Grace is going to have many opinions on of her own, so it's mostly going to be a lot of listening to me talking and Grace probably prodding and asking questions.
That's a little bit presumptuous.
Well,
although, to be fair, I did say to Elliot, I was like, before this episode, I was like, bro, I'm really going to need you to like help take the reins on this one and come up with some topics. Usually we do it together. We do it with Jack, our producer. Guys, the inbox is currently sitting at 67 emails, all of which require actioning on my part. It's
I love that Thursday. I can hear the anxiety in your voice. I love that I also haven't opened my email inbox in 3 days, because my policy is if I ignore the emails and pretend they don't exist, then I haven't not replied to anything.
I literally can't do that, though.
Yeah, no, it's actually bad. That policy is not good, and it's gotten me in trouble a lot.
Even though I'm running so fast this week, and I feel like I'm just like literally bouncing between 100 things every day, and it's like mildly frantic. I also feel like this is where I have the most energy with work, and I feel like I'm incredibly efficient when I have a lot on. Whereas some days, if I'm like, I don't have to do that much today, it takes me all day to do not very many tasks.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, fully.
When you were in the grind of like daily Fortnite uploads a couple years ago, and it was just so hectic and there was new content and so many ideas all the time, you just get in this flow. And even though it's like kind of mad and I'm like low key anxious right now, it also feels amazing.
Yeah, the level of productivity that you can achieve when you're in that zone is incredible. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do today? Oh, just recorded 4 different videos, edited 2 of them down into like bite-sized bits of content, managed to actually fully produce a thumbnail myself and do all this other stuff. It feels very, very good. But then after a while, like you do that for too long and you do burn out.
You do. So I can't do it forever, but I can definitely do it for the next 2 days.
And try and get through your 3,700 emails after this
67,
podcast.
dude.
67.
Please.
And the problem with your emails is they're not chill emails. They're not just like little replies. They're big things that are requiring negotiation or in-depth thought or a response. They're not just like little yes and no responses.
No, I wish.
Which is always unfortunate. But all right, we got topics to get into, because the more we talk about your week, the less time you're going to have to reply to these emails. Before we get into my big passionate topic, there is one little thing that I just, thought we'd cover quickly, which is obviously the fact that Jake Paul won his little boxing match.
Bro, did you pay for it?
I did.
You did.
Well, I didn't have a choice at the time, because I was like on a plane and I was at the airport and I didn't have time to go and like screen share on some Discord thing. Not that I would ever do that, because that would be illegal and circumventing the pay-per-view system. But I mean, number one, the show, I couldn't believe how they had Snoop Dogg, they had Ice Cube, and fucking Justin Bieber performing. I'm like, that ain't cheap.
No.
I was like, that is definitely where my $35 pay-per-view is going. But oh my God, they must have A, spent some money, but B, made some money.
$35 USD, that's how much it costs?
Yeah.
Damn, that's not cheap.
No, that's not cheap.
That is really not cheap for a digital viewing experience.
Yeah.
And with a first round knockout, no spoilers there, but like first round knockout, you're not getting a huge amount of value for money. It's all over and done in a couple minutes.
Yeah, no, literally. And the service that promoted the whole thing, what was their name again?
Triller.
Yeah, so Triller that put the whole thing on. I actually found it super interesting to watch, because you could tell they were almost embracing the kind of more, and even though there were a bunch of actual real fights that happened before the Jake Paul one, they in many ways almost seemed to be embracing the kind of less serious side. Snoop Dogg is one of the commentators, and he's just up there ranting off about how he's put $2 million on Jake Paul, and like how the other guy looks like he's, probably smoked some doobies recently. Like absolutely not professional at all. It was clearly very relaxed, clearly very laid back, but like executed well, but just in a very like meme culture way, which I thought was super interesting.
Just because it's very different. Really interesting transition to see in the boxing world. I can't believe I just said that sentence out of my mouth. But obviously, I mean, Jake Paul started with like the YouTube boxing fights. You know what I mean? Like it was totally social media. It was totally like YouTube culture. That's how he started. And then somehow from there, he was like, yeah, no, I actually want to be a professional boxer. And then the first professional boxing match he did, where he was, you know, an undercard, he was kind of memed at by the traditional boxing community. It was like, this is ridiculous that this guy is even here. So disappointing for the overall boxing community and that sort of thing. And now it seems as though, and maybe it's because he's generating a shitload of, you know, pay-per-views, they seem to have like gone the other way and fully embraced it.
No, I think the core boxing community still thinks it's a joke. I think Triller, they're kind of like a new server. They're not, they're kind of newer, right? So I think this is their way to break into the scene. They're willing to try more different things and go for a different angle.
Well, they're leaning into the social media angle.
And don't get me wrong, I actually think, like, when everyone was like, oh, Jake Paul won't win, I was like, no, he almost certainly will, because like Ben Askren, don't get me wrong, he was like a MMA fighter, incredible. Boxing and MMA, it's like being like, oh, I know how to skateboard, so I know how to snowboard. It's like, no, yeah, sure, you've still got a board under your feet, but it's a totally different activity.
Yeah.
Like, just because you can throw a punch in one way doesn't mean you can play in a totally different arena. But the fact is, like, Jake Paul, at a point, he's now been doing boxing effectively nonstop for 3 years. He doesn't really make as much YouTube content anymore.
No.
And ever since that initial fight, all he's done is train boxing nonstop. So he is without a doubt a good boxer. But the real question is, I don't think there's any way around, if he wants to keep doing this, his next fight being against a real boxer, because the narrative went like this. It went, the first fight happens. It's a YouTuber boxing match. Everyone's like, Jake Paul wins the fight and he's like, yep, I'm a boxer. And everyone's like, you're not a boxer. You beat up another YouTuber. Like, no one cares. Like, you beat up a random YouTuber, not even an athlete. So he's like, okay, my next fight is against an athlete. He picks a random basketball player. And it's like, okay, well, now it's Jake Paul versus an athlete. This guy is an athlete, not in any sense in the fighting sense, but he's an athlete. Jake Paul beats him and he's like, yeah, look, see, I beat an athlete. I'm a boxer. Everyone's like, Jake, this guy doesn't even fight. He plays basketball. You didn't even fight. Like, he's not a fighter. That doesn't mean anything. So then Jake Paul fights Ben Askren, who is a fighter, but an MMA fighter. He's like, hey, look, now I beat an athlete and now I beat a fighter. Like, I beat a fighter. I'm doing what you ask. Everyone's like, no, you fought someone who fights a completely different thing. Like, they're not a boxer. You're not a boxer until you beat someone who is a very good boxer. So I feel like now there's no way that if in his next fight he's not fighting someone who actually boxes, then it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. Although on the other hand, you could also say whoever the boxer is that beats Jake Paul, people could say like, oh, well, you didn't even beat a boxer, you beat a YouTuber.
No, for sure. But from the other side, whoever fights Jake Paul is going to get a big payday. So that's why they do it. Yeah. And if they're already proven as a boxer, it doesn't matter if they win a fight. Like, they don't need to prove that they're a boxer. They've already done it. Whereas Jake Paul's the one who's trying to say, no, I'm a real fighter. And to prove that he's a real fighter, he needs to beat a real fighter.
So has he said who he wants to fight next?
Nah, not really. I mean, he's doing all this like dumb stuff. He's like, challenge Conor McGregor, bro. It's like, okay, cool. But like, I mean, the one I'm interested to see, and this is the one that's now been indefinitely delayed because of apparent lack of interest, was Mayweather versus Logan Paul.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really? That was going to happen? Yeah. What do you mean lack of interest?
Apparently,
from who?
Well, that was the rumor. It effectively got delayed indefinitely, and the rumor was that they claimed it was because of COVID or some other reasons. Apparently, it was because of a lack of interest around the fight.
Like a lack of audience interest or a lack of interest from Mayweather?
Or revenue, like how everything's driven.
Damn.
No, like Mayweather had signed the contract. Logan had signed the contract. There was a signed contract and it got put off for some reason.
Wow.
Anyway, though, YouTuber boxing, the saga continues. Not really the kind of side plot that I was expecting to have with YouTube over the last 3 or 4 years. Like when it first was like, oh, we're gonna fight. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's like a funny like once-off little meme, like Jake Paul and Logan Paul and KSI punching each other. Like, yeah, why not? It's a fun little side hustle, and it's just become like the biggest sideshow in all of online entertainment, which I'm all about. I'm here for.
It's very entertaining, and I find the pay-per-view model fascinating.
Very. But our next topic, Jeff Kaplan, the legendary game developer himself, the man, the myth, the meme, as I think one news article I read put it, has finally left Blizzard.
How do you feel about this? Because I feel like Jeff Kaplan for you has been someone like since your early days of YouTube is someone like you've really looked up to.
Yeah.
You've always referenced him as like this incredible man that has done so many amazing things. Like I know you've had like a personal connection to his work.
Overwatch was always really, really cool for me because like I played TF2 back in the day. That was obviously a game I was close to.
Yeah.
But I never got to talk to anyone at Valve, the people who made the game.
Yeah.
And with Fortnite, obviously, like I know a lot of people who work on like in the space of the game, but more from like the marketing community side, less the developers.
Yeah.
Overwatch was really cool for me because that was literally before the game even released, before it even went into beta. I was lucky enough to get invited to fly out there and play it early. And
I remember at the time that was the highlight of your career.
That was sick. And you know what else? But you know what I think made that really cool, and what I think is one of those things that that I think is just so, or you know, maybe was, depending on where this topic discussion takes us, but was so like classic of Blizzard to do is I fly overseas like pretty regularly when there's not a pandemic to play games pre-release, right? Like I've did it for Apex Legends, do it for things all the time. And normally you fly overseas, you get put up in some hotel, and then like you've got the person who's in charge of managing all the influencers, and they get you all on a bus in the morning and they take you to some venue where they've set up like a bunch of computers in a warehouse, and you sit down and they're like, yep, play this, do this, blah, blah, blah. And maybe one of the developers will come and like explain how to play the game at the start. Blizzard, when they did Overwatch, literally invited everyone to the Blizzard campus. The computers that we were playing on were set up in the Team 4 offices. Literally, Team 4, if I say that's the team that develops Overwatch. Each team at Blizzard's got a different like number assigned to it. And actually, if you look on the side of Soldier 76's gun, I believe it says Team 4 or T4, which is a reference to that. Anyway, we got to go into their offices. All the developers were there, and you could see they were genuinely like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what people think. Like when they sit down and play our game, like Jeff was there, you'd literally be going up, just chatting to people, like making friends. And literally I have so many people on Team 4, both who are still working there and who have now left, where I was like, I would see them at an event. I'd be like, how are you? Like, how you doing? Like, literally, like, run up and like hug them, and it was so cool. Like, having like elements, like I don't know, like being able to appreciate a gameplay element and like be like, oh, I know that guy. Like, I remember I was like quite, I really like the guy, one of the guys who developed the net code for Overwatch. And I remember playing it when it was in beta, and it was on like 250 ping from Australia. And I messaged him. I was like, dude, this is incredible. Like, I don't know how you've done this, but I feel like I'm playing on like 10 ping when I'm actually on 200. And he was like, oh yeah, you know, that was like something we really focused on. So that was really, long story short, Jeff, and honestly, like a huge amount of the Overwatch development team holds a very special place for me because they were the first developers I ever actually got to really like meet and interact with and chat to. And you could always tell, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of developers, but I feel like Blizzard managed to a lot of the time have people a lot more like this, where they were just so passionate about what they were building and what they were doing and waiting to hear people's reactions. And like, it's not like a lot of people where someone's like, oh, like I really like the work you did. And they're like, oh, thank you. It's like, no, for them, it was like, oh yes. Like knowing that people were enjoying what they were doing was great. But anyway, so Jeff Kaplan, who saw the whole Overwatch development team from start to finish to Overwatch 2 where it is today. He saw that team through the Titan disaster, which if you don't know, basically before Overwatch was Overwatch, they were trying to develop a new MMO similar to World of Warcraft, but it was going to be more a shooter style MMO. And it was called Titan, and the whole project imploded, and it was a huge disaster within Blizzard, like hundreds of millions of dollars down the drain. And Jeff was able to kind of pull the team together, repitch it as Overwatch, and then they greenlit him to develop Overwatch with what remained of the team from Titan. Yeah. So very cool. And apparently that's another little, I'm just going to drop some occasional Easter eggs in there. Apparently the reason why every car in Overwatch floats is because there was some meme on the Titan development team that was like, no cars will have, like wheels don't exist or something like that. And it just went out of control. Anyway, though, legendary developer, Jeff Kaplan, who built Overwatch and, you know, is undeniably incredibly talented, has left Blizzard, and quite a few people have left Blizzard recently. And I wanted to use that kind of as a catalyst to talk about a semi-interesting topic, which is, and I also don't know exactly where this topic is going to go or what the outcome is going to be. But there are 3 specific developers I was thinking about mainly for this. These legendary developers of the game industry. What's happened? Where did they go wrong? Because there are several large game developers, which if you were talking about them a decade ago, 10 years ago, it would be with the deepest respect, the like, oh, blah, blah is developing this title. I've already bought it. Don't even need to know what it is. I don't even know what kind of game it is, but they're developing it. It is like they've got the Midas touch. Everything they touch turns to gold. I'm invested. Community loves them. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And obviously one developer, which I'm not going to go into, is Bungie that this happened to, because I'm not as versed on the details there. But if you look at, and we'll go surface level a lot, and I want to dive more into Blizzard because that's obviously one where I know it a bit more. But you had Valve, which we've talked about before.
Yeah. I remember like when Elliot was first getting into YouTube and was into games, and the way you would talk about Valve, you were like, Valve is this legendary company. They're amazing. Like they don't play by any rules and they create the most incredible stuff. You know, how they do it is just insane.
Well, I was just going to say, I want to preface this before going into each individual one with what I think is interesting, because I put some thought into these 3 different developers, thought about where they went wrong. And I mean, I say this is interesting. It probably doesn't come as a shock to many people. But the unifying factor between all 3, which I think is the catalyst and the cause for them kind of losing a lot of that respect and that reputation, is money, which is not that interesting on a surface level. But when I think about it, it's, even though all 3 of them I think have gone downhill for money, it's for different reasons in each one. And that's what I think is cool. So Valve, they've absolutely gone downhill as developers. Now, the reason... Like, this is Valve. They developed Half-Life, one of the most legendary, all-time appreciated game series of all time, universally praised without question. They also have developed Dota 2, TF2, Portal, and recently they have effectively ceased developing games. They still have a bunch of people there and a lot of people working on passion projects, and maybe they'll announce something crazy in the future. But the fact remains that effectively in the last decade, they have released nothing. I think Dota 2 came out of beta a decade ago. And since then, other than Half-Life Alyx, which is definitely you would put in the niche passion project pile, they haven't really done anything as developer. Now, the reason that happened to Valve seems relatively transparent. They have some of the best developers in the world, but they also have Steam. And Steam, which is the biggest digital platform where people buy games, just prints money. 30% of every sale goes straight to Valve. These developers work for years and years. Yeah, so like you get a company that spends 10 years making a game, they sell it on Steam. Valve, who didn't touch it other than just putting it on their storefront, gets a third of the money. Crazy. Valve basically is just printing money. They also have very much a culture of, so they have a flat structure in their company, which means there is no one's boss. It's not like you report to you, they report to them, and goes all the way up the chain to make sure that things are getting done. It's very much, apparently, you come into Valve, you work, and it's like, what do you want to do? You want to, don't really care. Just find things to do, or team up with a couple of people and decide something that you want to do, and maybe you'll end up shipping a game from it. Maybe you won't. I don't really know. Like that's literally it. So because they have made so much money and continue to make so much money off the Steam system, they just have no drive. There's no reason for them to be pushing their developers to actually realize their potential and ship games, because even if they do ship a game, and let's say it's the best game of all time, it's still going to make them less money than they would in a week of just literally having the Steam store exist. So there's no drive there. Now, the next one is Bethesda. And I think Bethesda is so interesting because they have one of the most legendary game developers of that previous generation, where they were putting out the Skyrim games, absolutely revolutionary. Fallout, revolutionary. There was like a shift. And also I think a change in expectation, but definitely a shift where for Bethesda, their kind of issue with money seemed to be that they started rushing projects. Instead of investing the time and the money to actually get a project up to where it should be and where it should stand at release, where it's actually functional. You could tell they were just pumping projects out the door. They were fully changing the way that a game would come together so that it could better adapt to microtransactions. And you saw that with most notably Fallout 76, which is, I think, the single largest dumpster fire of a game release that you have ever seen. And it was almost like literally when the game came out, almost like you turn and you look at them like the balls on you to fucking release this game. Yeah, no, it was shocking. It was outrageous. It wasn't even like a pre alpha. It was non-functional.
Shit.
And I was like, the balls you have to release this, charge $70 and expect that that's going to be okay is insane. But so they've now, Bethesda has had a bit of a streak of releasing very poor, buggy, glitchy games. And I think that they've kind of realized that their strategy of rushing out releases to try and maximize the amount of money they could make actually reached a point where it was hurting their reputation too much. They've gone dead silent on the new Skyrim game they're working on. And I think they've probably kind of realized that they need to knock this next one out of the park or their reputation is irrevocably damaged if it's not already. Blizzard is more complicated. And I think Blizzard is a bit harder to really actually pin down. But there's a few things I want to talk about with Blizzard, kind of going into, for those of you who don't know, kind of all the different things that have happened with them as a developer and where everything's gone wrong. So I'm just going to reel off a few of their game development issues that have happened. For example, like StarCraft, that game just got absolutely riddled with microtransactions. Then Heroes of the Storm was this kind of huge blunder for them, where there was the huge Dota and the League of Legends trend. And Dota actually started as a mod for Warcraft 3. That was one of their games. And IceFrog, who started it, apparently went to Blizzard and said, hey, I've got this super popular mod for one of your games. Like, do you want to help me develop it into a real game? And Blizzard literally turned to them and they were like, fuck off. Literally, they were just like, go away. We don't want to talk to you. So then IceFrog went to Valve and Valve was like, let's do this and made a bunch of money. Huge controversy early on because Valve's game had a lot of the same characters from Dota, which were direct infringement on
I was going to say,
Warcraft.
how the IP issues.
Yeah, there were a lot of issues. They had to change some names because of a legal case that Blizzard brought. It was but ultimately at the end of the day,
got salty.
Yeah, well, yeah. Then Blizzard was like, oh my God, we should have made a MOBA. What are we doing? Which is what Dota is. So then they came in super late with their version called Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah,
that kind of,
late.
it's not awful, but it really didn't perform super well. And now that's kind of flopped. They then tried re-releasing Warcraft 3, which was the initial kind of game that Dota was built on, but kind of as its own standalone title. And it was a buggy mess, completely just broken on release. I think they've now taken steps to fix it, but there was obviously where Overwatch is today, the community is very unhappy with. They're not seeing much progress on it. Meta has been not great for a while. And then World of Warcraft as well has had a lot of issues. But I think the thing that really you look at and for people who know and understand Blizzard as a company, this is where you might not know exactly what is going on internally, but you know it has to be bad. Because Blizzard, more than I would say any other company I know or have heard of, people work at Blizzard because they love Blizzard. They want to work at Blizzard. For example, I was chatting to a few people I know who work there, and they were chatting about how, they got job offers, or we were talking about the game developer job market.
Yeah.
And they were like, Riot, who develops League of Legends, on average will pay probably 20 to 30% more for the same role that you will get at Blizzard. People, a lot of the time, and these guys specifically got offered jobs at Riot, choose to work at Blizzard because they love Blizzard. Because for a lot of people, when they were growing up, Blizzard was the company that was making the games like World of Warcraft, like all the Diablo. It was that's what they were playing when they grew up. They developed so much respect for Blizzard as a company because of that. And then working for that company that was a huge part of their childhood was a huge drive. Yeah. So because of that, Blizzard retains its employees in almost all cases to a crazy degree. They have these awards that they give out at different year milestones. So I think it's like at your 2-year milestone, you get like a beer stein. I'm going to get the order of these wrong. I'm very sorry, but just to reel some off, then there's ones at 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. And I think the awards are something like a sword at 5, a shield at 10. Oh, this is definitely where I'm going wrong. A ring at 15. And I believe at 20, you get like a Lich King helmet or something like that. But anyway,
so sick.
The awards are sick. And the thing is, like, for a lot of companies, if they have an employee reach like 10, 15, 20 years at the company, that's a big deal. That's like super rare. Whoever works at the same company for that long, like that's pretty uncommon. Unless you're in like financial services and you're like moving up to partner. But that isn't how it works in game development. A lot of the time, you specialize in your niche, say web development or map design, and you can shift between companies quite easily. But people who stay at Blizzard, they stay there because they love the company. People stay at Blizzard for a very long time. It's like, oh, you left after 5 years. That was a pretty short stint. But recently, there has just been, and I mean over the past 3 to 4 years, a mass exodus of so much senior management and leadership from the company. It is insane. And Jeff Kaplan is the newest one of these. So like,
has he made a comment?
No. And I also wouldn't expect him to, make a public comment being like, I don't like Blizzard.
Has he announced his next move?
I don't think so, no.
He may not make a comment about why he's leaving, but I think you could read into the fact if he hasn't made a comment saying, thank you so much for my time at Blizzard. This has been the most incredible career experience of my life. Blah, blah, blah. The fact he hasn't said something like that.
He has made a comment about leaving. Okay. And it was very generically like, thankful for my time and the people I've worked with at Blizzard. Right. I remember reading it and I was like, man, that doesn't carry the passion of someone who is leaving a job that they love after as many years as it has been for Jeff, which I want to say was about 17.
Wow.
But also, and I think more importantly, he's leaving probably, I'm estimating, a year before the release of Overwatch 2. Now, he's been working on that for 3 years. If you don't just, once again, this is all me trying to read into something where I don't have direct first-person knowledge. I do know a lot of the people involved, and also I'm just applying basic logic. I feel like if you had been working, Overwatch is Jeff Kaplan's legacy. It's his baby. That is the game that he will be remembered for, unless, of course, he goes on to do something even more incredible, which he very well may. He released Overwatch, has been working on Overwatch 2 for probably 3 years now, and then just leaves a year before it releases? No, doesn't sound like that's an exit of, I've realized that I've reached, the end of my time at this thing.
This is a natural stopping point.
The natural stopping point is releasing Overwatch 2 and then maybe saying, okay, I want time for change. Yeah. So either A, he had some crazy other offer come up that was just too insane to pass up, or B, things went a bit sour. But to reel off a few names of people who have left Blizzard recently, Mike Morhaime, who's literally the founder of the company, retired and started his own different company. Because for people wondering, Activision actually kind of partially acquired. I think technically it was a joining of the companies, but it was kind of like Activision more acquiring Blizzard because they were the bigger company about, I want to say 8-9 years ago. And yeah, so because of that, as a founder, he is able to kind of step out of the company. So almost the entire senior development team on World of Warcraft has kind of jumped in the last few years, which obviously is like literally the game that founded Blizzard. Ben Brode, who was kind of the man who effectively created Hearthstone and was the public face of Hearthstone, he left as well. On the Overwatch team, there's been a bunch of people that left. Michael Chu, who is the guy who built the whole Overwatch story, their lead map designer left. Jeff Kaplan's left. It's just been, from Blizzard's end, all these employees who were almost like the old guard faces of the company and who were like Blizzard till they die, have in rapid succession, more rapid succession, because obviously people leave, but this is a large group of very dedicated core developers who have all left in a very short timeline, all while you're hearing a lot of talk about the culture of Blizzard degrading. And a lot of that, it would seem, and this is both from some chats I've had with people I know who worked on Team 4 and also just like the general public sense, because a lot of interviews and like private comments have come out of people just saying that the whole culture of what built Blizzard, which was create great games, and that's literally just it. Create great games, do what you love, build incredible things, has just completely eroded over the past few years. And largely that seems like it is not uncorrelated with the acquisition by Activision. And now there's just this sudden drive towards, like for example, Diablo, one of their all-time most famous IPs, has, if you were building a game for the fans, you would be building the Diablo sequel that everyone's been asking for. But instead, it's released as a mobile game. Now, I'm sure it will be a great mobile game. In fact, I've heard it is. But that is very clearly a decision that has been made at a high level of management to maximize revenue as opposed to actual fan service. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people who work on the development teams, and I think the community kind of feels right now, where they no longer feel like Blizzard is a company there to who is doing things for the fans. They're now a company that is there that is doing things for Blizzard and their top line revenue.
Yeah.
Which is very, very dangerous. But I'm very interested to see what happens because, it's genuinely tough.
I feel like it's kind of an overall theme that we've been talking about for the last couple months now, where it's just like what the games development industry looks like and what games development looks like overall is really different and has taken on this kind of like seismic shift over the last few years that has happened gradually, and it's happened with games like Fortnite, this shift to a free-to-play model and this shift to a lot more public attention being on games companies, a lot more games companies listing publicly. Activision Blizzard is obviously a listed company. It means they have to answer to a huge amount more shareholders than they did privately when just making great games, which is like a beautiful goal and overall aim to have, but perhaps not what actually shareholders want. It's like the whole state of the industry has just taken a little bit of a shift from what it was.
And I do think it's interesting. And I'm not, and this isn't me saying that I don't think Epic Games will make mistakes, and they very much will do things wrong. And not that they are themselves flawless, but I do think it's very interesting noting the difference between how Epic conducts itself as a company, because it's privately owned, it's not publicly traded. And of course they have investors like Tencent and people who are invested in the game making money.
But Tim Sweeney is still the controlling shareholder.
Overall, Tim Sweeney, this one individual guy who is nothing but a passionate game developer, like we've talked about in weeks before, this guy just wants to make cool shit. Like that's what he's about. He actually doesn't care if his bank account says 4 billion or 10 billion. He eats KFC for dinner.
I love it.
But like, so because of that, you've had Epic Games come in and they're undercutting the Steam system when it comes to charging developers less.
They've deeply shaken up the whole industry.
They've had with Fortnite more opportunity than anyone else to make obscene. If they had put loot boxes in Fortnite,
go listen to that conversation from a couple weeks ago.
God, Tim Sweeney would literally get the world's first custom gold-plated Learjet made because he would have just made that much money from my credit card alone. But the point is that Epic is one of the few developers now that has consistently been able to make these decisions where they are kind of choosing to do the right thing as opposed to the revenue thing.
Yeah.
And I think that you can very clearly see with companies like Blizzard Activision that now they are publicly traded and there are all these shareholders. And there's this, as I think you and I, one of our big learnings this year has been, because, we're getting a lot more into like in investing and like talking with other companies, is this like this whole thing around like narrative, where it's like the as soon as you're publicly traded, it's no longer even necessarily about what's doing even like best for a company or anything. It's just about creating like the feeling of momentum and movement, and you're like, and we're growing and we're doing this, and now this big neat thing over here, and then we just sign that with them, and it's like you just want to be able to keep this feeling of momentum for your shareholders because that's what keeps them happy. Like if you're a game developer the way it used to work, which is, hey, we're gonna make a game, should be pretty good. I don't know, we'll see you in 6 years. That doesn't work anymore. You need to be, the shareholders like, what do you mean we'll see you in 6 years? We're waiting 6 years. We want something now. Put something out tomorrow. And then I want an update the next week. And then I want a new microtransaction in the week after that. And I want you to be doing this. And I want signed deals here. And I want you to make a mobile game while you're developing that other game. Like, there is so much drive to just go. That now it is so hard as a game developer to do the whole, like, we're going to make a cool game.
We're going to go away
It'll be
and
ready
create
when
a
it's
AAA
ready.
game. Yeah.
Anyway, very interesting. I think that it's a very interesting time for game development in general because it's not that I think games are necessarily getting worse because I do, like, obviously, like, there are incredible games being released all the time right now.
Yeah.
And technology has made some crazy high heights of game development achievable now. I do at the same time worry about a lot of, and you know, it's kind of sad, but I'm sure other companies will rise up as well. But there is definitely a trend that I think started, you know, kind of a bit more subtly, but now is completely unavoidable. Where you look around at all these big developers that are now publicly traded companies, and you can clearly map a decline in public perception of the company along with a rise in their stock price.
Crazy.
So
kind of sad.
Sad.
Okay, so where do you think Jeff's going to go? Let's wrap it up on that note. What's he going to do?
If I was a betting man and I had to literally just bet one thing, I think he'll join Mike Morhaim's new game development studio because that's actually where a lot of the top Blizzard, it was literally like them jumping ship. It was so a lot of the people that left Blizzard went and joined Mike because Mike was literally seen as like the father. Mike was daddy. He was loved. He was respected. Everyone just saw him as like this figure from every conversation I had. I got that sense. So I think now a lot of that old guard, and it also seemed like he was someone who also, from everyone I've talked to, Mike genuinely gave a shit about his employees. Like I talked to so many people who were telling me about these like great in-depth discussions that they'd had with Mike. And I think that would be so true with the very like old guard developers like Jeff Kaplan who have been there for so long, and they helped build Blizzard alongside him and kind of take it to where it is today. My bet is that he is going to go and join Mike. Put it in. I want 10-1 odds because there's a lot of places that Jeff could go, and I'm sure there are a lot of developers who would be writing very large checks to have him join their team.
Yeah. As
they should, because the man has done some pretty incredible things.
Would he go to Epic?
Oh, you know what? Epic I actually think would fit a lot of the kind of his ethos around game development. But I guess, you know, the real question and what would be a good place to leave it is, what does this mean for Overwatch 2?
Ooh.
Because
what is Overwatch without Jeff?
I was already a bit uncertain for Overwatch 2, to be honest, because don't get me wrong, I think the campaign will be fantastic, but I do think that multiplayer is what is going to be the thing that carries the game and, you know, really makes it's what gives most games these days staying power. But Jeff's being taken over by Aaron Keller, who is another absolutely incredible developer. I think he's worked at Blizzard for 18 years himself. I think that the developers behind the team are still incredible. I think the only thing that scares me is not what Jeff leaving is going to do to Overwatch, but more just what does what does Jeff leaving say about the overall state of Blizzard?
And what morale does that create?
Yeah, and what morale does that create? Because I think that is a heavy one to lose. But anyway, guys, let us know what you think in the comments down below.
The Elliot fans will love this episode because I feel like it was like Elliot's monologue on the state of development in the games industry, which was actually so, like, I learn a lot from that. I still, like, development isn't my strong suit. So I don't know. I feel like people will love hearing that.
Very interesting.
All right, guys, that wraps us up for this week. We will see you next week. Let us know your thoughts below. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, do the things, and we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.